So what's my advice to someone experiencing depression? Advice for someone experiencing it mildly, and advice for someone experiencing it acutely, where it's all encompassing and emergency like. I'll start with the mild, just as we should with hot sauce. Start with the mild and then get to the hot, spicy stuff. If you're experiencing depression mildly and you don't want to experience it, and you really got to ask yourself that question if you don't want to be experiencing it, because I've experienced mild depression for most of my life and acute depression for periods of my life where I was just seeing the world as opportunities for me to commit suicide, basically. But in the mild states, the most helpful thing for me was to get some awareness and understand, do I really want to not be depressed? Because there are not benefits, but depression has a function, and it has a function for a period of time. Depression allows us to rest, even if that rest doesn't make us feel very rested, but I would say it has to do with our attachment to the depression, not so much the depression itself. Our depression basically is all attachment to it. So like I've experienced depression, mild depression, when I burnt out. And so my body and my mind and my spirit needed the rest. If you really don't want to feel it and you've asked yourself that question, and you can just ask yourself the question anytime you are not in a urgent state of mind, when you are relaxed, and you might still feel depressed, obviously, or experiencing depression, but you are not, there's no distraction from it. You are just experiencing it. That's the time to ask, because that's when you're actually with it. If someone says, I don't want to feel depressed when they're in the middle of something else, you can't see how it's serving you in that moment. Depression has a place, like everything has a place. I wouldn't wish it on anyone, obviously, but for the people going through it that need it for themselves for whatever reason, for whatever payoff they're getting or function or whatever you want to call it, I would say have awareness and appreciation for it first and foremost. Then work toward changing your environment. That's pretty much it. The environment is everything. It's what you expose yourself to. It's what you look at. It's how much you're looking at artificial light. There's a lot of biological, I would say, explanation for mild depression. I think most people these days experience a mild depression if they are people who don't get enough light from the sun and are out of touch with their circadian rhythm, whether that's because they eat too late or their diet doesn't allow them to digest appropriately, or they are not rhythmically aligned with the sunrise and sunset. I suffered from all those things for a really long time. Yeah, I would say look at your environment for people experiencing mild depression. And one thing I'll say is if someone's feeling depressed because of a situational thing like grief, I would say just keep going through it. That's a good thing. Like it's not a good thing in terms of it doesn't feel good, but it's a good thing in terms of it's going to have so much benefit for you. And it's really supposed to be there. And you should, none of this stuff we should try to swat away like a bug, because it's going to come back. But that you really shouldn't try to even push away or get rid of. It really needs to be there for the time it'll be there. Let the storm come and let it pass. So that's just a little tangential thing as far as types of depression. But for people experiencing acute suicidal or related emergency like depression, where it's all encompassing and danger in some way, the first thing to do is to recognize something, to recognize that even if you don't believe it, that there is a proposition for you. The proposition is that your experience right now is not the only experience to be had. As all encompassing as it feels, I know it's eternal. It feels eternal, like it will never change. It will always be this way. If you are close to a place of suicide or some type of danger, that means you're desperate. The desperation is valuable. The desperation is what we're going to be harnessing for you to be able to, I'm not even going to say for you to be able to do something, because I know that you don't want to be convinced of anything other than how terrible this is. And it is terrible. It's the worst. It's hell. This is when people talk about hell, like in religion, this is what they're talking about. This is it. Like, you're in hell. Congratulations. You've come to the depths. But the value of hell, both in religion and actually right now, is that your desperation is what is your saving grace. It's what will allow you to reach out. The hand that will reach back out to grab yours is you from the inside, but it's not going to feel like that this entire time. It's going to feel like it's something outside of you and that you don't trust it. The thing I would say to do is to look at your desperation. Look at the tactile experience of your desperation. What is your desperation like? And the next thing I would say is to write down what it's like. Write down, what does the desperation feel like? It's not just, I want to die for this reason, but what does the desperation feel like? Is it a yearning? Is it urgent? Is it latent? When do you see it come up during the day? what does it look like? What does it feel like? What does it sound like? So for me, to give an example, I realize an example might be helpful for me here. For me, at a really depressed part of my life, the way that I noticed my desperation is I would notice myself as I was driving home from work, look out at cars on the road and imagining myself crashing into everything. So the desperation, what is the tactile experience of that desperation? Destruction, damage, crashing, battling in a way, but crashing, like crashing and smashing, puncturing, punching. That's what it feels like. So that's what I would say, is to write all of that down. If you have to write through a lot of the repetitive suicidal mantra, which is like, life is not worth living, life is not whatever, that's fine, but you got to get to the root of what it feels like from a tactile place. And the reason I say that is because it's going to be what grounds your desperation in something that is beyond the story that you're telling yourself. Because the desperation, the emotionality that you're experiencing is real. It's the stories that you're telling yourself about it. Everything that leads you to the conclusion from your desperation that suicide is the only option, that is all a story that is a part of you, but is not all of you. But the desperation is what is at the root of that. And so what we want to do is extract the desperation out of that story and bring it and turn it so that you then reach out for help from a part of you that is there and able to help you. And some people describe it as God, but it doesn't have to be. For me, it didn't feel like, I was atheist at the time. It was just me wanting better for myself. It was just me thinking, damn, classic thing, thinking about the other people in your life. That's the other hand reaching out for you, me thinking, damn, if I don't make it home, there's a part of me that is, at least I won't have to deal with this anymore. There's also a part of me that thinks about the people in my life that I still love and care about. And if you're beyond that point, or you believe nobody cares about you, which is not true, but if you're beyond that point, then you just got to skip ahead to understanding that's really just a reflection from a part of you inside. Look at the desperation, see the desperation as just desperation. Don't characterize it. Don't say that it's wanting to die. Don't say that it's wanting to live. It's just desperation. Write down what the desperation feels like. And then from there, expose yourself to whatever you can find in your environment that feels comforting to what you see on the page. So I don't mean comforting to you with your story about I want to die and this and that. And I don't mean to shirk it. I'm shirking the story you have about your desperation. I'm not shirking your desperation. Your desperation is real. That's what I'm trying to look at right now, not your desire to die. I'm trying to look at the desperation that is causing you to think that you need to die in order to escape it. We are going to get out of your desperation. It's going to be fine. Even if you don't trust me, that's fine. I didn't trust myself saying that at the time, years ago. But look at your desperation, write it down so it's in concrete form, and grab anything in your environment. It doesn't matter what it is, that if you were helping somebody else and you were saying, what does this desperation, what does this shit need? Might be a flower, it might be a song, it might be music, it might be another person, it might be, I'm not condoning any substance use, especially addictive substances, which all substances in a way are addictive. If you're otherwise going to be dead, then anything to keep you from that story of desperation. Ideally, it's something that you wouldn't become further addicted to, but addiction's another story, so we'll leave that for another time. Grab anything in your environment that if you were helping somebody else go through this, that's what you would do. And the reason why you write it down on the page is so that's your patient. You are no longer the person who is going to be committing suicide or thinking about committing suicide. You are now taking care of this theoretical patient that you see on the page. You see this person on the page that wrote down all their experiences of desperation. What would you do if someone in your life said, I need this? Honestly, me, I'd probably turn on some music and I'd just listen to them. Do whatever that is. Repeat those steps over and over and over again until you start to see more things come in and you start to feel willingness. Once you feel willingness to continue reaching out your hand to God or to spirit or whatever, then you can start to look at things that are, we might say, the next level up, where it's more stories than just the suicide story, more stories than I need to commit suicide or I needed to commit suicide to escape it or whatever. But don't rush to that. Obviously, you wouldn't be rushing to it, but this is what you do until you're ready to go to the next step. That's what I would say, people experiencing depression.